And welcome into the Four Verticals Podcast, episode 165 for February 24th, 2026. High top, of course, as usual, Jacksonville, Florida. A very cold Jacksonville, Florida. Having a good authority, though, that after today, starting tomorrow and for the foreseeable future, it'll be warm again. Back, highs in the, potentially in the low 80s again, much like this weekend. So warmer days are ahead, but it's cold right now as I'm recording this as of 1:42 Eastern Time, live on YouTube and on Spotify. Not live on Spotify, but live on YouTube only. Welcome to the show. Got a loaded show for you guys today. A lot of things to discuss. Pre-spring top 25 finally coming out. Sort of like a pre-spring Tuesday poll for the pre-spring practice window. Got some more reasonable expectations. Two of them today. Oklahoma and South Carolina. And we'll wrap up the show with historical college football what ifs. A new segment we're starting here on the show that we started last week. So if you're new here, welcome to the show. We do this show twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, around this time in the afternoon. Only anytime we want on a set time, but usually around this time we'll do our show. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and to subscribe to the podcast feed as well if you're listening to us on Spotify. And be sure to follow us on the socials, on X, Twitter, and also on Instagram as well. You can find us over there. Those links should be in the channel description, just to look over there. But yeah, a lot of things to talk about. Let's go ahead and get started here. As per usual, a very loaded show. Pre-spring top 25. As we get into, we're sort of getting out of this transitional period from in between the national championship and spring practice. Figure, like most people, we'll do a pre-spring top 25, right? And we have right here on my spreadsheet. Now, you can't see this, though, in the future when we do future polls, when we do our weekly Tuesday poll. We will hopefully get a way where you can see this, the actual graphic. So hopefully we will get that sorted out here pretty soon. But you'll just have to bear with me on this in terms of reading this off. So we're going to go from 25 to 1. So that first year we'll do 25 through 20, counting down. And number 25 on the pre-spring top 25, my pre-spring top 25, Kansas State. New head coach, new staff there with Colin Klein coming back. Alumni, former player. Great player, by the way, too. He was there from 2011 to 2012. The big thing here is not only with the new coaching staff, which I think might be an upgrade over the previous one, though. Look, give credit where all credit is due with Chris Klieman. He won the Big 12 championship game in 2022. So he's a good coach, and of course he retires. Colin Klein is back at Kansas State. I think the big thing here for them, for Kansas State, is they get Avery Johnson back. And you saw what happened to Avery Johnson last year. He struggled at times. Didn't necessarily develop the way he thought he would have, or at least I thought he would have. But now he's reunited with Colin Klein. I think he was there when he was there. Both of them, I think, were there at the same time. But either way, Colin Klein being there, you have Avery Johnson. If Colin Klein can do similar to what he did with Marcel Reed at Texas A&M, I think you could see Kansas State once again be a sleeper pick in the Big 12. Now, look, I picked them to win the conference, I believe, last year, so I don't know if I'm doing it this year, but I believe pre-spring they should be, at least in my opinion, a top 25 team. Next one here, this might be a little bit controversial, Washington at 24. This one's tough because I like what they're doing up there. I like Jet Fish. I like their program. I have questions, though, about DeMond Williams. Not talent, okay, not DeMond Williams is talent. Talented player, okay, good dual threat quarterback. I think he's highly underrated in terms of how folks talk about him nationally. A lot of folks maybe regionally talk about him a bit more in terms of a potential Heisman candidate. Now, the thing that worries me here, and it's worried a lot of folks, is what the team looks like in terms of, psychologically, are they together? Because if you don't remember, back, what was it, January, last month, for December, DeMond Williams entered into the portal. And he did this, or at least he made his announcement public. It leaked out before, but he made his announcement public during, at the same time, the whole university was having a funeral for another student athlete. Very odd timing there. He enters in the portal, tests the waters. LSU was in the mix, and I think a few others were, behind the scenes. He ends up not going anywhere. He comes back. They've reached some sort of a deal. Very awkward situation there. I just don't know if that team's fully together. So I'm trying to say now, if they are together, then this is a dangerous team, okay? I'm just letting you know that right now. This is a very, very good team. If they're not together and there is a very much a overarching psychological issue, the team's not together, everyone's fighting amongst each other, no one's happy, then this could easily blow up. So I am counting on the fact that they are going to be together. There's not going to be this awkwardness to where there's no leadership. Jamal Williams is acting weird behind the scenes, given what transpired over the past few months. I think they should be, if everything goes swimmingly, which we all know that doesn't always happen, they should be the 24th best team in the country pre-spring. Next one here, one that is also getting also not getting a whole lot of attention. Houston Cougars at 24 or at 23. Again, like I said before, a lot of folks still think Houston's in the G5. They are not. They're in the Big 12 now. They've been there for a few years now. I think 3, I believe now. This is their 4th year. They should be a good team. Willie Fritz is there. He's been there. This is the 2nd year. Last year he got there, had to turn over the entire program, portaled in a whole bunch of players, especially on defense. They won 9 games last year. Very, very silently winning 9 games. You don't do that by accident, at least in my opinion. And with the true freshman coming in, I forget the kid's name. Let me try to look this up. I said it before. Let me see here. Houston football. Showing this before the actual show began, but a mistake. I should know who this is. I pay attention to a lot of college football. Anyway, but yeah, pretty sure they have the 5-star quarterback coming in. On top of that, and the recruiting class they have coming in, they should be good. I think it might be a little bit early, but given the Big 12 is, as people do call it, America's college football conference, a lot of things happen there, a lot of craziness happens. I think they should be a pre-spring top 25 team. Next one here. These next 2 in particular are also controversial too, but for some folks, 22 Auburn. Now, I've had my issues with talent leaving Auburn, like Cam Coleman and others. I will still say that is an issue, but given my fascination with this, Josh Heupel, Art Briles, veering sheet offense that Alex Glesh is going to be running over there or up there in Auburn, the fact that they bring in Byron Brown, they bring in a lot of good players from South Florida, not maybe the level of Cam Coleman, but maybe perhaps better personality, better leadership skills. This team could pop. It could easily go a totally different direction, which we have discussed on this show before, or it could go another direction where it's very positive and is sort of echoing Josh Heupel's first year at Tennessee, where there's a lot of scoring points, defense maybe not very good. So because of Byron Brown being there, maybe the leadership there at Auburn, particularly with the team itself, like amongst the players, maybe it's a little bit better structure. Even with the talent leaving, I will give them some. At least I will blindly trust them that this offense, if it is easy enough to install, regardless of who you have at quarterback, I will give them the benefit of the doubt. They should be a pre-spring top 25 team, even though they went 5-7 last year. Same with the team at number 21, Florida. Yes, they went 4-8 last year, or was it 4-8 or 5-7? Doesn't matter. They didn't go to a bowl game. Again, I understand it. Coaching change, a lot of talent leaving. You lose DJ Lagway. There's even in the portal. Like again, they bring in, speaking of Auburn, Eric Singleton, Georgia Tech, Auburn, now to Florida. Great wide receiver. It'll be amazing there, I think. Going to be a number 1 target for sure. The quarterback situation, though, needs to be figured out. They keep the running back. They have really good talent that is still there that did not leave when Bill Napier got fired. So John Sirmawall is he's walking into a really good situation there in Gainesville. I think so. I think this team, if things go well, if the team's really buying in, and if there's no major injuries, if they can get quarterback right, especially now with the new OC Buster Faulkner, they should. I think they should be ranked, even in the preseason poll when we get to it in August. I think they should be up there in the low 20s. I think, the low 20s. So at number 21, Florida. Number 20, their rival Tennessee. Questions at quarterback. Joy Aguilar probably not come back based on the court ruling, so it'll be a new quarterback there. I'm not too concerned about that, given that, again, as people have mentioned, the Art Briles veer and shoot stuff, very easy for quarterbacks to pick up, even if you're not the most talented kid. Yes, the guys that were behind Aguilar, that's, ties back to the whole Nico situation. They're young, okay? They're talented, but they're young. I'm not too concerned about that. More than a little bit more less other folks, but I can understand the uneasiness about who was it? Jake Merglinger, whatever his name is, who was the backup last year, will probably be the starter this year. I get it. Some folks aren't like totally over the moon about him. I think based on the fact that, again, that offense is very easy to learn once you learn it. It's easy to install. I don't think it's too much an issue for me with Tennessee. With Josh Heupel, I have blindly given my trust towards them. I think this team deserves, in a way, based on the sample size they've had over the years, to be in this position, to at least trust that, hey, even with all the new stuff coming in, new players, new talent, I feel pretty good about them. Number 19, again, a little bit controversial, but maybe not, is Penn State. Now, again, based on if you were to think about Penn State in terms of last year's team and what they've lost from them, you would go, no, this is not a top 25 team. And I would agree with you. But here's the thing. If you recall, obviously, paper pop here, they bring in basically 90% of Matt Campbell's former team with them, Iowa State. Upgrade a quarterback, bring in a whole bunch of wide receivers, offensive line, defensive line. Based on all of that and the fact that they've upgraded that quarterback, I think with Rocco Becht, they should be a top 25 team, in my opinion. It's risky. This can easily change, right? My opinion could change. But a pre-spring top 25, yeah, I think this is fine. Have Penn State up here. And they did finish the year strong. Ratios of a very workable schedule, but they did what sort of their schedule dictated, right? So I think if you're a Penn State fan, I would feel pretty good about this team next year. Let's see here now. So I guess we were doing 19 through 15, I guess. So that was 19. Number 18, Louisville. A lot of new talent coming in. They have a new quarterback coming in. I forget the guy's name. I should have done more research here, but it is what it is. Let's see. Louisville transfer portal. We should have. I know who this is. It's name's escaping me. Let's see here. Preseason. Transfer portal. Let's see. Give me 1 second, guys. Lincoln Kienholz, yeah, from Ohio State. Yeah, I totally forgot who that was, who they got. So I was in there the other day on the transfer portal site, but I was going through it this weekend. But yeah, Lincoln Kienholz, yeah. So he is there. Jeff Brom, very much still one of the best coaches in college ball in terms of offensive play callers. Again, much like with Josh Heupel at Tennessee, he has sort of earned this blind trust to where, hey, even if all this changes, even with bringing in someone like Lincoln Kienholz, who didn't play a whole lot at Ohio State, I think that's probably an upgrade at quarterback after what you had last year with Miller Moss. So I feel pretty good about Louisville at 18. 17 BYU, returning a lot of their production from last year. That's fine. Could they be a little bit higher? No, given their talent level, but still they have good players come back. It's just, I don't know. I think 17 is probably right for them. 16 SMU, quarterback Jennings is back, I believe. Right, last year you're able to keep him after he was a very attractive candidate for other jobs in the coaching cycle last year. They've been 16. 15, Michigan. Even with the coaching change, again, you have Bryce Irwin back. You have a lot of talent that did not actually leave once they fired Sherrone Moore. I feel pretty good about that. You bring in the new offensive coordinator with Kyle Willingham. I think that is a massive upgrade over what you had with the crap you're doing with Sherrone Moore for the past 2 years. So that, Michigan at 15, they could be easily higher, right? I could easily have them in the top 10. That they could be higher. I just think, based on what I think Bryce Irwin could be going into year 2, I am very excited for Michigan, I think. So, Michigan at 15. Let's see here. Let's go 14 to 11. 14 LSU. New coaching staff of Lane Kiffin. We're going to see a lot of huge theme here for new coaching staff, new quarterback. You bring in Sam Levy. You also have the transfer from USC, the freshman from last year, kind of your insurance situation there, quarterback. If Levin's not ready to go, which I think he will be, even though he was hurt at the end of last year and he had surgery, I think he should be ready to go. There's still a lot of talent there. I'm a big fan of kind of what Lane Kiffin's doing with the staff. I like that. Their schedule, while it's it's an SEC schedule, it's not the easiest nor is it the hardest one. It's probably definitely the gray area. So LSU at 14, Bama 13. How about that? 13. I know that's a little bit higher than some folks have him. I am very excited to see what Keelan Russell will do in that offense if he is the starter. That's my opinion. It will be him. I could be wrong on that. It could be Austin Mack, who has been there. He's been a loyal soldier of killing the board, even going back to his Washington days. Either one. I'm not saying it's a total upgrade over what you had last year or even the year before with Ty Simpson and Jalen Milroe before, but with Keelan Russell, who, again, I am assuming he'll be the starter, given what I have heard from other people, that's exciting. That to me is a very exciting prospect. He's a former 5-star guy, committed. Ironically, he was committed to SMU, who we talked about earlier. Very talented quarterback, dual threat guy. He has good mobility, also a very decent arm as well. That if he is a starter there, I feel pretty good. You still have Ryan Williams. Defense, though, and offensive line, big question. Because if that was not the case, they could be a little bit higher, I think. Number 12, Oklahoma. Get Jackson Arnold back. You also get Ben Arbuckle back. That combo is good. You largely, I think, return mostly the same team. I think there was some players who did leave the NFL draft, but from my knowledge of what I've read, most of the same team come back. You have quarterback back. You have your offensive coordinator back. That's good enough for me. I think 12 for Oklahoma is, I think, fine. Number 11, Ole Miss. I would just say this, and I said this before a couple weeks ago. If the whole Trinidad Chambliss thing didn't go down, because it does seem like he will be starting for them, because the judge ruled in favor of him, so he will be back next year for Ole Miss. If he was not there, if Trinidad Chambliss he wasn't confirmed to come back, they would be a lot lower. Ole Miss, it would probably be borderline top 25, like in the 24, 23 range. Because he had it in Trinidad, they go a little bit higher. That's how much value I think he adds to this team. So just letting you know that. Again, Pete Golding, technically first-year head coach, first year as a full-time head coach. You're really running basically the same stuff with I think they got the OC from Eastern Carolina, I believe. So you're running basically the same Lane Kiffin style of offense. So no concerns there, but you are missing some decent amount of talent though from last year's team. But again, you bring back Trinidad, that is a very good thing there. All right, top 10 time. Texas Tech, number 10. Joe McGuire, another year. You bring in another transfer quarterback of Sorsby. I think it's a major upgrade over Brent Morton. That's good enough for me to put them number 10 based on what they've done in the portal and recruiting. They're a very good team. Number 9, Indiana, just slightly lower than I think a lot of folks have met. Some folks have met the preseason number 1. I understand that, but my thing of Indiana, though, and I'm not saying they're comparable to Auburn in 2010 after they won the national title. They're the only team in history, in the at least modern era of college football, to win a national title and not be ranked in the top 10. I'm not saying I'm not saying the drop off from last year's Indiana team to this year will be like Auburn from 2010 to 2011. I'm not saying that. That was very, very dramatic. It's definitely the lowest I think we have seen a team that won the national title a year before to be ranked like this low in the preseason. They could go back a little bit higher, right? But they do lose Fernando Mendoza. They lose a lot of guys in the NFL draft. You bring in what's the guy's name? Hoover, I believe, Josh Hoover from Texas Christian. Is he going to be a good heir apparent to the guy you just had? I mean, that's the typical looking for a question, but it's a good question to ask. Right? We don't know. I mean, Josh Hoover put up some good numbers at TCU. He did fairly well, but I don't know. We'll see. It's a bit of a mystery in terms of how good he will actually be with their system and how they do things there in Bloomington. We'll see. They can move up a little bit higher. They could go even lower. But I think this might be the lowest they'll go. I think they can go I think the only way they can go is higher, in my opinion. So again, I know that sounds like I'm downplaying Indiana. I'm not trying to. Number 8, USC. Very excited for USC. I've talked about them a couple weeks ago for Lincoln Riley. This is a huge year for them. This is definitely a culmination point of the way they have transformed their program, right? So you go from the last year of Caleb Williams where they are right now, bring in Deontay Lynn in between that. You have Gary Patterson now coming in as a DC. I would expect that even with the coordinator change, defense should be good, a strong point. Offense, same thing. They should be a little bit better every year under with a lot of these guys having another year under Lincoln system. Not to mention they just signed number 1 class in the country too. So USC number 8, Texas A&M number 7. I trust Mike Elko. Now again, losing Colin Klein is a big deal. Kind of makes you think, hey, hopefully they prepare for this. I think they have. So I would imagine, I think they did promote from within. So at least I think they're running the same stuff. I would imagine maybe slightly different. So, we'll see. One thing about Mike Elko that gives me a little bit more trust than some of these other defensive coordinator type head coaches. Mike Elko respects offense, right? He's not this, Will Muschamp or Zach Arnett type coach where it's like, oh, got to go high formation and do some really boring offense. No, bro, that's not the way college football works, especially when you're at, at these lower level schools. And A&M's not a lower level school, but just in general, you have to respect offense. You have to do something that's creative, right? Texas A&M, when they had Colin Klein for the past few years, was doing something creative. Even before Mike Elko got to Texas A&M, we have his offensive coordinator, Kevin Johns. I don't know where he is now, but would have felt more comfortable bringing him in since Elko and him know each other. I don't know if if something happened in between Elko leaving Duke and him being at Texas A&M. I don't know, but I trust Mike Elko. That's what I'm saying. I trust him. The talent there, the talent is still there. You have another year on the Marcel Reed. You do lose the receivers. Okay, that is a concern. Did it very well in the portal. We'll see how they can replenish that. Miami. Speaking of Duke, they get Darian Mensah to come in from Miami or from Duke. So interconference transfer there. So you solve the quarterback. You do lose a lot of talent, though. But again, much like sort of in a sense, kind of like which I was talking about with Texas A&M, Mike Elko, I think Mario Cristobal is starting to get to the point where I am trusting him more and more to where I'm not totally worried about a total collapse, right? From 1 year having really, really good results to the next year. I'm not expecting that. Could be wrong on that, but I'm not totally expecting it. Miami on number 6, they've really done a good job of stacking up talent, recruiting class, I'm not concerned. Next one here, Oregon, number 5. Again, similar situation to a lot of these teams. New coordinators, I'm not too concerned at all. I don't think. You bring back Dante Moore. This would be good enough for me. You have a lot of the receivers are back from last year. So Oregon at number 5. Georgia number 4. I feel pretty good. Largely the same team from last year. Gunnar Solomon at quarterback. You keep your coaching staff intact. Number 3, Notre Dame. Same thing. Texas is number 2. I know a lot of folks will have Texas at number 1. I'm sure the AP poll, once we get there, preseason poll in about 5 months or so, we'll have Texas probably once again preseason number 1. I understand that. Okay, totally understand that. It's just that the thing about Texas is that there's a lot of new faces coming in, particularly in the portal, which I do like a lot of the gets. Right, you bring in Hollywood Slumbers, you bring in Cam Coleman from Auburn. Right, a lot of these guys are highly talented guys, especially Cam Coleman. Right, he's again I've said it before and I'll say it again. He was in the same recruiting class with Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. He kind of gets forgotten about because he was at Auburn with terrible quarterback play and just terrible team structure in general. So we haven't really seen him be unleashed yet. Totally. Now, again, I talked about it earlier with the whole, locker room issues at Auburn and the sort of leadership problems there. That could be an issue at Texas. I will totally, well, not guarantee, but I will totally at least understand, at least acknowledge that could be an issue. I'm not expecting it to be an issue. I know a lot of folks are expecting it to be an issue. I'm going to give Stark the benefit of the doubt here, right? You have Arch Manning back. You bring in Will Muschamp, I believe, is a massive upgrade over what you had previously. So I think Texas being number 2 is solid. Again, the transfer thing, the leadership qualities, especially with Cam Coleman, that is a concern. We'll see how it develops. My mind changes in between now and when we do the post-spring top 25, maybe. And then number 1, of course, Ohio State. Bring back Jeremiah Smith, largely the same team from last year. I'm not too worried about the talent replenishment at Ohio State, much like most of these teams with Ryan Day. You bring in a new offensive coordinator, Robert Smith. Concern, but given how well Matt Patricia worked out last year for them, I do have a little more confidence in that this will not be a total disaster. I'll be wrong on that, but we'll see. Very good. That's your pre-spring top 25. How about that? I'm going to get some quick water break real quick, and we'll continue on with our reasonable expectations and win the show with historical college football what-ifs. Again, if you guys are watching live, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, we do this show twice a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, all about college football, right? The show used to be structured in a way we're used to talk about other stuff like Marvel and Star Wars news. We still do that, but that is now moved, if you're wondering, if you're a returning viewer, that is now moved now to the extra pods on Spotify only. So be sure, if you're on Spotify listening to this, we'll post this later today after we're done, of course, live on YouTube. be sure to subscribe. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast feed and on YouTube. That's all we're asking for, okay? Of all the things we ask on this channel is subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Let me see here. Go back to my notes here where we're at now. Okay, reasonable expectations. Oklahoma, just talked about them, right? Oklahoma coming off of the playoff run. You have the blown lead versus Bama. You beat Bama at their place last year, which no one's talking about now. Very underrated game from last year. What are the reasonable expectations for Oklahoma next season, right? Excuse me. I think for Oklahoma, in a lot of sense, the reasonable expectation should be back to the playoff. I think, like I've mentioned during our pre-spring top 25, they have the talent to get back. I have no doubt they have the talent to get back. They have the quarterback. They have the wide receivers back. I think mostly from last year. There's some guys moved around from the portal. Most of the same team back. You bring in, you keep the same personnel. So a lot of the things have been largely the same. Again, the incoming transfers. You bring in some good names. Livingstone from Texas. You bring in some other Fields from Oregon. Was it Dakota Fields, I believe? Yeah. And you also bring in Rocky Beers from Colorado State. How about that? I forgot he was over there. So, yes, you lose some players, and you also gain some good ones. I don't think you lost that many players to the NFL draft. I don't think it's a large number, but largely, again, as long as you have your core players, your core star players, especially a quarterback, and you have your OC come back with Ben Arbuckle for another year, I think Oklahoma this year should probably be in the playoffs again. Now, the schedule, though, is workable to a certain extent, somewhat workable, though there are some landmines for sure, right? Of course, we'll talk more about this when we get into our record projections here in a few months. Non-conference, tough a little bit because you have to go to Michigan, likely a big noon kickoff game. Yeah, I've had Georgia. So your first two big games are on the road, so that's already a bit of a hurdle. And then after that, the Georgia game, you're rewarded with Texas. Then you sort of levels off. You have Kentucky, Mississippi State, South Carolina. At Florida, it's going to be tough road environment. Ole Miss, A&M, and Missouri. So, I mean, it's not like an overly bearing schedule, but there are the beginning of the year, I'll just say that for your first two big games are definitely the toughest ones of the year by far. I mean, two road games back-to-back in your P4 opponents there. That's tough. So, even with that schedule, even with the departures they've had, whether it's attrition from the draft or the portal, this team should be back in the playoffs, I think, again. I think that's probably your reasonable expectation. Now, if you do less than that, right, if you go like 8-4, 9-3, 7-5, yeah, there's some concern there for sure. And there should be concern. I mean, this is a team that is largely last year and this year built to be in the playoff based on what you did in the portal, especially last year, quarterback show. You know, I guess I'm not going to say I've been a big defender of Brent Venables, but I've understood to a certain extent why folks have been cautious about him. I understand that, right? We just talked about the whole defensive coordinator, head coach type. Hasn't always worked out. Brent Venables, I'm not saying he's like the best example of it working out, but he's definitely better than others, right? I think it's clear that he does invest in offense, right? I think he does understand that the offense needs to be, especially with a coach like him, he needs to have a good enough offense that can score enough points, right? So you don't want to, again, do the whole Will Muschamp thing of Florida or at South Carolina where you bring in guys like, freaking Kurt Roper and like Brent Pease or whatever, these like weird coordinator hires. I don't think you can do that, especially with a defensive-minded coach. You just can't do that, right? I think Brent Venables has understood that. I think bringing in Ben Arbuckle, I'm going to say it's like totally saved his career, but I think you can sort of build a good argument for that, right? So again, I think they are built to go to the not national championship, but built to go to the playoff. Now, can they win the national championship? I doubt that. I think they certainly are not they're at the very least not a team I would assume they would be in that discussion. Playoff team, yes. Can they win a playoff game? Yes. Can they make it to like the semifinals? I doubt it. Or at least I don't feel that overly good about it. I don't think they'll be like a favorite to go to the Final Four or anything like that. I don't think so. But again, I mean, this schedule, it is tough. And then your first two P4 games are both on the road. Then, congratulations, you get to play Texas in the neutral site game in Dallas. So then it kind of levels out a little bit after that. So we'll see with Oklahoma. But yeah, I think the reasonable expectation for them, for an OU fan, should be, 10-2, back to the playoff again, and hopefully we don't screw it up like we did the last time against Pam in the first round. So reasonable expectation for OU, I think it's playoff. Now, contrast to that, what about South Carolina and Shane Beamer, right? Last year, they were a top 25 team. I think even as high as like top 15-ish, I believe. Kind of strange to think about. Of course, they start out kind of shaky. Offense is a little bit sloppy. You did not have good receivers last year. Very mixed bag there. Defense is still fairly good. Still fairly good last year. Should be good again this year. But offense just wasn't good enough at times last year. And the A&M game last year is a classic example of that, right? It's just a classic, what was South Carolina last year? If you were a generic college football fan, right? If you wanted to know, hey, what was South Carolina last year? How good were they last year? Right? If you were going through all the SEC teams going into this year. Well, just showing the A&M game, the highlights of it. In the first half, amazing, right? Sellers looks like a Heisman Trophy candidate. He's going off. He's having fun. Then the second half, whoop. So that was here South Carolina experience last year. Definitely the pendulum goes one way and goes the other way. Much like Brent Venables, I understand there's a ton of pressure on Shane Beamer to get things, I guess, sort of back to where they were a couple years ago when they won 9 games and they were a top 25 borderline team and they were in the conversation to go to the college football playoff. I get that. But in the words of Bud Elliott, you have to understand that, teams like Arkansas, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Kentucky, those type of teams, especially in the SEC, are the take the checks, take the losses, right? It's the classic, well, not classic, but it's the whole, be thankful you're in this conference or else you'll not be making this money. So, yeah, they're one of those teams where they have to take the loss, right? Someone has to lose all the games. And unfortunately, South Carolina, at least historically, outside of the Spurrier years, if like Connor Shaw and Jadeveon Clowney, besides that, like they have usually been, again, one of those take the checks, take the losses side teams where they have to, they're the punching bag, or one of them, the SEC. I know that sounds, depressing if you're a South Carolina fan, but that's how this works. And do I expect them to be at the same level they were a couple years ago, or even I think the year before? I think we're in actually no, Beamer's first year. No, not necessarily. No, could they get to a bowl game? I mean, you have to look at their schedule. I just talked about they have to play OU. I don't think the schedule's. I can find it on here, at least on the site I'm using. So I'll at the very least imagine it's gonna be a very tough schedule. I'll assume without looking at it, even though I probably should, that they're probably going to be a dog in most of their games. But again, that's if you're a South Carolina fan, you should be used to that. That's kind of normal, right? A couple years ago was not normal being in the playoff race. That is not typically what South Carolina is. Not saying I'd be degrading. I'm just saying that's just how it works for you guys. And unfortunately, you're one of those teams that has to take the losses and just be thankful you're getting all this money. But could it be better, right? Could it be better? Could you guys be a little bit better? Could the Lower Stars really step up? Could some of your wide receivers, unlike last year, step up? Could your defense close out some of these games, these big games? I hope so, right? I mean, you have certainly the talent there at quarterback, but I don't. It's tough. It really is tough. And a team like South Carolina, I know those fans cheer like crazy. I know that environment up there, even having been there before at Williams-Brice, is very much so a underrated sort of a gold mine, if you will, of just energy and enthusiasm. Again, they have someone has to take the losses, and South Carolina is one of those programs that has historically done that. So I think 6-6, 7 wins plus would be great for them. But anything beyond like an 8-win season, I just don't. I don't know for sure. Again, we'll have to look at the schedules when they as soon as they get released. But we'll look at the schedules again once we get towards the record projections. But I would imagine we do them at some point during the summer. They're not going to be very very high in my opinion. So just letting you know right now, that's not a team I am looking that I am thinking very highly of. I'll just say that. But yeah, I think for South Carolina, I think the reasonable expectation is just you need to see some better improvement from last year. You need to at least get to a bowl game, to at least keep the hype cycle going, keep fans invested and whatnot. So I would assume that's on the cards. At least that's what most of you are probably thinking if you're a Gamecocks fan. Lastly, now, as we wrap up the show, again, a little bit shorter show than usual. We usually don't go this short, but this is February, and this is not a typical during the season type show. We usually go for like well over an hour because I have game previews and news. So it's nothing wrong with this. I actually kind of don't mind this. Actually, a little change of pace. But anyway, last up here, we've been doing this new segment along with reasonable expectations. Historical what ifs, right? Last week we did a couple of them. This week we'll do, we started last week. This week we'll do a lot more on this show. Today we have some interesting ones for sure. First, what if? What if Georgia won the SEC title game in 2012? Interesting one here. So if you don't remember, wind back to 2012. It's Bama, Georgia, Todd Gurley, Aaron Murray, A.J. McCarron, T.J. Yeldon, Amari Cooper, Saban versus Mark Richter, Georgia. Classic SEC championship game. I still believe this one and maybe the Bama Georgia game in 2018, the two best SEC title games I have seen in my lifetime, I think. Yeah, frankly, very, very entertaining games. This one's definitely up there in terms of the best conference title games in general. And this is a game back and forth, of course, as a classic. And Bama won, right? And if I remember correctly, the final drive, Georgia's driving. There are no timeouts. Aaron Murray throws a pass to, I think, Javaris King, I believe. King goes down, run off clock. The game's over. They can't get the last play off, or what could have been the last play. They lose the game. What if that wasn't the case? Or what if Georgia somehow had a timeout left and they score, win the game? What would have happened? Georgia probably won the national title. Now, do I think it would have been – do I think a national title game, if I'm assuming their name is there like they were in the real life and the actual timeline, would it have been a closer, more competitive game? I don't know. Probably not. I would imagine Georgia would have done the same thing against Notre Dame. Not because Notre Dame was a bad team that year. It's just the offensive limitations of Everett Golson were very obvious throughout the year, for the most part. And Bama exposed it. Other teams throughout the year kind of tried to expose it. And, I think Georgia would have done the exact same thing. So, yeah, I mean, if that happens, Georgia wins the national title. And by the way, if that happens, it probably doesn't diminish Nick Saban. I think Bama's fine. But with Georgia, though, you never get Kirby Smart, right? He never leaves, right? Or he never leaves Bama. At least at the moment, or at least he doesn't leave for Georgia. Though maybe at some point Mark Richt eventually retires. Maybe he ends up going to Georgia, but at least you don't get him immediately. Now the other thing is here, if folks don't remember, let's just say this happens, Mark Richt stays, he wins the national title, he carries on for a while, and maybe they'll even go after Kirby Smart. The thing is, though, in 2012, you have to remember, speaking of Bama, Bama's rival Auburn was going for a coaching search, right? Gene Chizik, 3-9 season, historically bad season for Auburn, the worst one, at least in my lifetime. He gets let go, they go through a coaching search. Now, in the actual timeline, they hire Gus Malzahn, and the rest is what it is, right? But at the time, they did interview Kirby Smart. And I think a lot of folks have told the story to where Kirby didn't meet with Auburn officials, and he basically told them, i.e. what Nick Saban did to Bama is, look, I want certain things done. I want A, B, C, and D done. Can you do this? And he was frank with them. Can you guys do all these things I want? Because if you don't, I'm not coming here. Auburn officials said no. Kirby Smart said, all right, see ya. Have a nice day. I wonder, if that does change in this alternate universe. I don't know if it does or not. But at least that is something we also have to consider here, is that he was in the running for that Auburn job. So interesting to see there what would have happened if Mark Richt, he stays on, and what if, Kirby Smart goes elsewhere, right? Well, where is he end up? Is it Auburn? Is it, potentially like Oklahoma or something like that? And let's just say the timeline continues. Bob Stoops retires. Do they go after did they go after Kirby Smart? I don't know. Very, very interesting what the possibilities there are. Very interesting. Realm of possibilities there are endless, in my opinion. Excuse me. Next one here. Dennis Dixon. What if Dennis Dixon, does not get hurt during the 2007 season? Now, if you don't know, or if you don't remember, don't worry, I did it for you. At least I'm remembering for you. Dennis Dixon, quarterback at Oregon, right? This was, I believe, Chip Kelly's first year as the offense coordinator. It was still Mike Bellotti. One of his, I think, final years, I believe. It was either his last year or his second to last year. Either way, one of his final years there at Oregon, right? Before he transitions out to, I think he was the athletic director, and then he went on TV for a little bit. But anyway, Bellotti was still there. Chip Kelly was there for, I think, his first year. You have Dennis Dixon, dual threat type quarterback. They're running the Chip Kelly spread option stuff. They start the year, I believe, 7-1 or 6-1. I don't necessarily remember off the top of my head, but they were at one point the number 2 team in the country. Of course, that was the 07 season, the curse of number 2. All these top 5 teams losing to unranked teams, complete chaos, right? As the 07 season was, and something that we haven't seen since. I know a lot of folks will say last season was close. I don't think so. Other folks will also bring up 2021. I don't think so either. I just don't think we've had that yet. Now, as for Dennis Dixon, so they start out with 1 loss up until a Thursday night game, I believe, against Arizona. And Dennis Dixon was in the mix for the Heisman Trophy. I mean, he was, was in the running, and he was up there with everyone else who was in the mix for it at the time. Of course, obviously, Tim Tebow ends up winning it, but in the Arizona game on that Thursday night, I believe in November, he tears his ACL on a non-contact play, very similar to what happened to Hendon Hooker at Tennessee, very similar injury. He gets hurt in that game, and they lose that game, and Oregon, the season kind of spirals out. They don't do anything meaningful after that, and they are out of the championship race. What if he does not get hurt? What if they win that game against Arizona? Let's just say his injury is the reason why they lost that game. If they don't, they continue to win, Oregon, they would have been in the national championship. Everything else stays the same, and Oregon just continues to win. He doesn't get hurt. Oregon is in the national title game years earlier before they are when they play against Cam Newton and Auburn, right? And I do believe Dennis Dixon wins the Heisman too. So he's, Oregon finally has at least they had their Heisman winner before Marcus Mariota, right? So you just move up the timeline of Oregon having a national title appearance and a Heisman Trophy winner. So yeah, in terms of the achievements there, a lot of those things come earlier. Do they win the national title over Ohio State, or if it's even, I don't know, LSU maybe, if they make it in somehow? I don't know. Probably not. But at least they do make it to the national title a couple years early. They do have guys a trophy winner earlier than what they ended up having, right? With Mariota. So yeah, very interesting what if there with Dennis Dixon does not get hurt. Second to last one here, LSU. What if LSU had a better offense when Leonard Fournette was there? So yeah, if you don't remember, trip down memory lane here, Leonard Fournette, 5-star running back out of New Orleans, comes into LSU. Like the dude was it's like the most paid attention to freshman non-quarterback I've ever seen. Like the guy was like nonstop coverage. Everyone was talking about him. His freshman year, very quiet in 2014, but 2015 though, up until the game against Alabama, unstoppable. The Auburn game where he has the Auburn defender like going on try to tackle him from the head. He runs over another guy. It's just like the dominant start of the season. He was way up there in the Heisman discussion. Probably could have won it if the season ended. Then the Bama game happens. He gets shut down. The offense sputters with Brandon Harris. And, of course, a couple years later, Les Miles gets fired, right? Largely because the offense, with all that talent they had there, was not used properly. And what's really interesting, too, is all those players that were there in, 2015 and 2016, those guys were eventually on that national title team that Ed Orgeron led with Joe Burrow. All those same guys, which is crazy. But what if Leonard Fournette had a better offense, right? What if he was, what if you pluck Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma at the time or wherever he was before that, I think East Carolina, or whatever. Go pluck him, Lincoln Riley, from wherever he was at the time. Put him on LSU's coaching staff, or just any better offensive mind other than Cam Cameron. That team is so much better, I think. All that talent there, especially with Fournette, completely wasted. I mean, that was a horrible mismanaging there from Les Miles. I think Leonard, in terms of his college production, now yes, you can make the argument that his best overall player probably either Patrick Peterson, him, Tyrann Mathieu, Odell. But if you want to go pure overall production, especially on the offense, not Odell Beckham, but I think Leonard Fournette is the best offensive player in the Les Miles era. That's my opinion. I could be wrong on that, but I think he is the best player from the Les Miles era at LSU. If you just had a better offense there, a better offensive system, LSU probably doesn't lose to Bama. At least I don't think. The Bama team in 2015, while they had Derrick Henry, who is still doing very well in the NFL, up until today, that was very flawed. Team had, defense had some flaws, especially in the secondary. Offense, quarterback was very flawed. So yes, even that team didn't win the national championship. People think, look at it in a different lens now. I would just say back in 2015, there were a lot of folks who were like, "And this Bama team is really bad. Like this is, I remember folks saying this is the worst Bama team that Sam has had since the first year to win the national title." So yeah, if LSU just had a better offensive system around that Leonard Fournette era of LSU, they probably don't lose to Bama. They probably don't go on that large losing streak at the end of 2015. They don't sputter out of control in 2016. They probably have a large amount of success. Now, what is interesting, if that did happen, then you don't get Joe Burrow and Ed Orgeron in 2019 LSU. So there's that to consider. But yeah, that's again all these what ifs. Still, a lot of these what ifs have very, very interesting butterfly effect of this thing. If you change this one thing, everything else changes. And for LSU, if you just have a better offensive system around that team in that era, right? The latter half of Les Miles' time there, you don't see Les Miles getting fired, but that's that's crazy because you get that. You keep Les Miles, you never get Joe Burrow and that team in 2019. So yeah, weird impacts there. And there's not last one here. What if Jimbo Fisher, speaking of LSU, does take LSU instead of Texas A&M? So this one again, 2016, 2017. So speaking of LSU in 2016 and I guess 2015, of course LSU goes on that large losing streak after they were getting all the way up to number 2 team in the country. And again, this is Fournette's first year as the starter there at running back. They lose to Bama. They go on a massive losing streak, lose Arkansas and I think eventually Ole Miss. So that whole thing happens off the field. You start to get the rumors of, is this if Les Miles is there, regime change in the cards here? You start to hear rumors about Jimbo Fisher, and you start to hear stuff about, other potential players involved, coaches. I mean, one of them was Tom Herman at Houston. You hear all of that. Now, ultimately, again, they go with Ed Orgeron, and they get a national title, but several years down the road, he gets fired. But what if Jimbo Fisher? He was at Florida State at the time. They're coming off a very solid year in 2016. Going to that year in 2017 where they're the preseason number 2, number 3 team in the country. They have that opening game against Bama and Mercedes-Benz Stadium, almost game of the century level in 2017 to lose that game, and they spiral out. Jimbo throws the deuces and he leaves for A&M. What if Jimbo Fisher leaves a year later? What if he leaves Florida State on a good note, right? You go 10-2 or wherever you go with Florida State, you take the LSU job. Again, like we just talked about with the previous one involving LSU, you don't get 2019. You don't get 2019 LSU. You get Jimbo Fisher in. If Jimbo Fisher was at LSU, having known what we know now, that would have been a total disaster. It would have been very, very identical to what you probably saw at A&M. Good recruiting, nothing meaningful. Probably would have gone fired after a few years later. Now for A&M though, you get the other side of the coin where you don't get Jimbo Fisher. So who do you get after you fire Kevin Sumlin, right? Is it Tom Herman? Is it someone else? Is it Steve Sarkisian maybe? That's a whole other discussion there too. It's what does A&M do? Because you don't get Jimbo Fisher, right? In this year, he's at LSU. That to me opens up a whole other web of possibilities. And I think if you're an A&M fan, I mean, I guess you are satisfied now because you do get Jimbo Fisher and you have Mike Elko, so it worked out. But that's interesting now. What does A&M do? What does Texas A&M do instead of Jimbo Fisher? If he took the LSU job, if LSU fired Les Miles in 2015, right? Well, what does LSU do down the road, right? If they don't have Jimbo Fisher available at A&M, or for A&M to get, they get right again. Is it Tom Herman at the time? Is it someone else? We'll never know. But yeah, very interesting exercise there we've been doing here, starting since last week. These what ifs, very fascinating. So that's it for the show. That's all for the notes we have. Not about that. We have about an hour-long show, almost an hour long, about 10 minutes short. Of course, we'll be back on Tuesday. We'll try to do an extra pod tomorrow. Not a guarantee, but we'll try to do one tomorrow. What about Thursday? So yeah, keep it on your podcast feed for that. Until Thursday, for all of you guys on YouTube. Until then, take care, and we'll see you guys on the next stream.